China responds to new U.S. tariffs, plus preparations continue for a U.S. DPRK summit. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. The Trump administration plans to go ahead with tariffs on Chinese goods in the next month. The announcement from the White House said the United States would levy 25% tariffs on $50 billion worth of Chinese products. China's Commerce Ministry said the U.S. move was a surprise, adding, quote, "No matter what measures the U.S. will take, China is confident and capable of defending our national interests." Well, there is much to talk about. Let's get right to our panel. Joining us from Beijing is Qinduo Xu. He's a senior researcher with the Pangoal Institution. With us here in Washington is Becker. He's the host of Loud and Clear on Radio Sputnik International and a U.S. DPRK analyst. Merrill Matthews is the resident scholar at the Institute for Policy Innovation in Dallas, Texas. And joining us in the studio as well is CGTN's White House correspondent, Nathan King. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Nathan, 25% tariffs on $50 billion worth of goods. That's U.S. imports from China. So explain this.
Well, I mean, these were in the works for a while. There was a public consultation period, actually attended all that. A lot of companies very worried about this because of their supply chains and the like. But given last week's talks, when He, China's top economic advisor, was here with his opposite number, Stephen Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, and they reported progress, Mnuchin said trade war's on hold. And then suddenly this week, we get the list of tariffs, and not just that, but also they're starting to move on Chinese investment restrictions in technology, export controls on U.S. technology, which Treasury has been looking into for months, and the president is saying that he will move on that at the end of June as well. So you're scratching your head here. Wilbur Ross is about to, the U.S. Commerce Secretary is about to go to China and take on this new trade deal, take this trade negotiation further. There's a lot of talk here in Washington that this is a negotiating tactic to try and strengthen the U.S. position ahead of those talks. But what bugs me, really, is that the climate was actually getting better between the U.S. and China in the last round of trade talks. Remember, there was some concessions. The Surgan anti-dumping cases were ended by China. China announced it's reducing tariffs on foreign cars. The US president had said, look, let's try and work out a way around the ZTE and the sanctions busting penalties that basically shut the company down. So there were these confidence building measures, and then suddenly this comes along, and we of course get this very late night statement from the Ministry of Commerce in Beijing going, surprised? But then they also said, we're kind of not surprised because this happens all the time. So you know the whiplash that we've seen over the Korean summit? It's on, it's off, it's on, it's off. We're seeing the same on trade.
Okay, let's get the view from Beijing. Let's go to Qinduo Xu. Qinduo, as I said, as Nathan just pointed out as well, the Ministry of Commerce in China has responded. It said that China's interests will be protected. And just to repeat something that Nathan said, he says part of this move may be motivated by the fact that this strengthens the hand of the U.S. negotiating team ahead of this next round of talks. Question is, how can China retaliate?
Well, if you look at the start of this so-called trade war between China and the United States, China has been confident, has determination that it will fight back against the U.S. Remember, China is the fastest growing export market for the United States. So China does have some, let's say, cards to play against the United States if the U.S. imposes tariffs on the Chinese exports. And also, China is to overtake the United States to become the largest retail market in 2018. So I think the traction of the Chinese market is growing for the U.S. goods and for U.S. business communities. I'm not sure the U.S. is going to shutting itself out of the Chinese market. So in that sense, China does have some strengths to play against the U.S. if there's a trade war.
Merrill Matthews, we hear this announcement from the Trump administration, and as we've just heard, China has got some cards to play. It can retaliate. Does this take us further down the road to what could be a full-blown trade war?
I suppose it could, but I think Nathan got it exactly right. You know, we woke up this morning today. Last week, we were hearing President Trump say, everything is going great. We're working well. We're making progress on ZTE. We wake up this morning, we find out that he's moving forward with these with these trade tariffs and possible sanctions and so forth. And it, you know, in most places, when you're doing a good cop, bad cop, you have at least two people. Trump seems to like to be both the good cop and the bad cop.
Can I just add to that? There are good.
Sure.
I think that he's hitting the nail on the head here, because we've talked a lot about the split in the administration when it comes to dealing with trade and China and longer-term structural issues to do with the Chinese and US economies. And there is good cops and bad cops. The good cops, Steve Mnuchin, the US Treasury Secretary, wants a deal. His new economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, wants a deal. But Robert Lighthizer, the US Trade Representative, Peter Navarro, the Death by China guy, doesn't want a deal. And so there has been this split. Is he basically trying to satisfy his administration and the arguing that has been actually spilling out into the press ahead of these Beijing talks? Last time, when they were there, Steve Mnuchin and Peter Navarro had an argument in front of the Beijing negotiators. I'm just saying.
Brian, that good cop, bad cop analogy is perfect for this next issue, which I want to raise. And it actually points to the ambivalence of the Trump position. Just a short while ago, he was blaming China for everything, for a host of trade issues. Now he says, particularly on this, with regards to the company called ZTE, the telecommunications company, he says he's reached a deal. He's going to keep them in business.
Well, he cares about China jobs. I mean, that was after a discussion with Xi Jinping. The one thing you can count on with the Trump administration is that you can't count on anything. And we see this over and over again, as the other guests have talked about. And as I think the whole world knows, the art of the deal actually, in a way, means nothing, because you never know what's bluster, what's bluff, and what's the bottom line. Apparently, there is no bottom line. Perhaps it's just whoever talked to Donald Trump last. Perhaps it's his advisors saying, well, the 2018 midterm elections are on, and we have to show the United Auto Workers, who we potentially can win over, partly at least in Michigan, a swing state that's important to us, that we have to do that. Or perhaps it's to strengthen the hand of Wilbur Ross as he goes to Beijing. You never know. It's all of these divergent, contradictory phenomena going on in the same White House. And so as a consequence, there is no strategic thinking. None. It's really completely empirical. It's completely eclectic. And Donald Trump doesn't care. He doesn't care if he contradicts himself. He says that, I mean, in his mind, he's thinking and saying to himself, this really makes me seem smart. I've kept them off balance. Of course, everyone's off balance, and as a consequence, no one knows what the U.S. actually wants.
What do you make of, I'll get to you in a moment, Nathan. And Merrill, what do you make of that, the fact that the only thing one can count on when it comes to Donald Trump is the fact that you can't count on anything?
Well, if you're using this as a tactic, and there's some discussion that he's using this as a tactic, if you use it too often, people no longer pay attention to the tactic. But, you know, the strange thing here is in the U.S., we used to think Kim Jong-un was unpredictable. Now we've got somebody even more unpredictable. And but I would give the president a little bit of credit. I think he may be a little more strategic in this than it appears to us, because he oftentimes does seem to get to the end that he wants to. So as chaotic as it seems, it oftentimes seems to end up in getting what he wants, and I think that's his ultimate goal.
So, Nathan, the ends justify the means?
What ends? I mean, what trade deal has he negotiated that has somehow worked out? In fact, you know, he's pulled out of a lot of things. Paris Climate, Iran deal, other trade deals. He's put on tariffs. But what deal has he negotiated, apart from with South Korea, which is a very small change on the Kursk deal? I mean, the NAFTA negotiations are still going on. They're not going to pass Congress before the midterm elections, it looks like. He's walked out the Iran deal and alienated allies. So when it comes back to this deal, my view is, if you're making progress, why do you then put on pressure? Because what I don't think they've calculated here is that China will have to respond. It's already drawn up a list of $50 billion worth of US goods it's going to put a 25% tariff on, soybeans, Boeing airplanes, and the like, and they will be forced to respond. And they've said that they will respond. So if you're changing the climate of the negotiations, you're really shooting yourself in the foot.
I want to just hazard a guess, too. Maybe it really is just the issue of who talked to Donald Trump last. I mean, before he canceled the DPRK summit, it was John Bolton who talked to him last. Right. I mean, it's possible that it could be at this kind of a low level with Donald Trump. Again, someone who is aimless in terms of, except he wants to succeed, whatever that means. Yeah. It seems impossible in a way that could be dominating U.S. politics, but perhaps it is.
You know, Nathan, when this trade dispute started, the big complaint from the Americans was this trade imbalance with China. That was the big thing.
Among others, yeah.
Among others, but we heard about that all the time.
Yeah.
How do these things address that?
Okay, well, the US President, Donald Trump, asked essentially for a reduction in the trade deficit, which is about $335 billion, depending on how you count it. That's in goods, if you don't count services. And he wants $200 billion off that. All the negotiators here in
services, there's a surplus, right?
Yes, exactly. When you take it all together, it's kind of a wash, actually. Wang Guan did a very good explainer on this, our political correspondent. You should check it out. So get back to the point, $200 billion was the figure that Donald Trump wanted to reduce the deficit by. And he wanted the Chinese delegation to sign on to this. Right. China essentially argued, look, trade is not a zero-sum game. If we reduce $200 billion, it'll appear somewhere else on your balance sheet. But we can actually satisfy this number as China continues to open up, as China's middle class continues to rise, and we need more high-quality goods, and we need things like agriculture, liquefied natural gas, semiconductors, all this sort of stuff as we rise. So you might find that actually this figure is more than that, but we don't want to put a figure on it because it's actually almost impossible to do that.
Qinduo, these trade talks will continue. The United States has said that it wants all trade barriers removed. It wants equal access to Chinese markets. Now, these are issues that have been on the table for a long time. What is the status of those issues?
Well, I think the Chinese side probably is more concerned with those like investment limits and also the restrictions of the U.S. export to the Chinese market, because to reduce the trade imbalance or to alleviate the concern about trade deficit on the U.S. side is not a big issue for China. Is that China has capacity to help with that. China can purchase a lot of stuff from the United States, either for once for all or as a continual manner in the upcoming years. Because China is a growing market, there's a lot of need of a quality product from the U.S., as my colleague pointed out. But at the same time, I think the concern is really about possible decoupling or delinkage between the two economies, like limits on the Chinese investment. I think that's a concern not only for the Chinese government, but also for a lot of potential Chinese investors.